I'm not going to agree with the decision when it happens, but I think the writing is on the wall that Dallas Goedert's time in Philadelphia is coming to an end. I'll tell you why I feel that way coming up next on this Friday edition of Locked On Eagles.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Welcome into this Friday edition of the show. I'm your host, Louie DiBiase. Whether you're listening in Philadelphia, Alaska, Scotland, doesn't matter. We appreciate you making us part of your Monday through Friday. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. The Eagles were busy at work today, signing 3 different free agents, including a return specialist in Avery Williams. They brought in a tight end in Kylen Granson, formerly of the Indianapolis Colts, brought back a former Eagle in edge rusher, outside linebacker Patrick Johnson. None of these moves, again, really move the needle. It continues the theme of Howie Roseman's offseason, thrift shopping. Like, hey, Macklemore, can we go thrift shopping? Play that song on loop. That's what Howie Roseman's been doing all offseason long, taking chances on younger players that are cheap and have upside. And I think that's what continued today. Avery Williams, again, I like it. They lost Kenneth Gainwell as a returner. Same with Isaiah Rodgers and Britton Covey. They need to replenish that position. And again, I like Patrick Johnson, a good special teamer. And the Eagles need depth when it comes to edge rushers. The move that I'm mostly watching of the 3 today is the signing of Kylen Granson, the 26-year-old former Indianapolis Colts tight end, actually top 20 as a pass blocker the last 2 years and run blocker as a tight end, according to Pro Football Focus. Has had multiple 300-plus yard receiving seasons. Is this guy Dallas Goedert? Not even close. Is he better than Grant Calcaterra? I feel like they're similar tier players. It's very similar to the Harrison Bryant signing the other day. But when you combine the fact that the Eagles have now added 2 young tight ends in 3 days, they do have Grant Calcaterra potentially getting even better in 2025. When you look at the fact that this is a very deep tight end class in the upcoming NFL draft, when you look at Dallas Goedert has no guaranteed money left on 1 year of this remaining contract, the writing is on the wall that the Eagles are preparing for life without Dallas Goedert. And I think it could happen today, at any point, maybe even when I'm recording. That would be frustrating. It could happen tomorrow, Sunday, next week at the latest. I don't agree with the decision. I don't think they should do it, but I do think Dallas Goedert is going to get traded or released within the next week and a half. I just think that's the reality that you should expect. And again, I do not agree with it. Like the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson move, even if you are not able to sign an extension with that player, if you're not willing to pay Dallas Goedert, unless you feel like this guy is going to hold out, I would try to do whatever I can to make him comfortable for 1 more year, throw in some guarantees, and use him as a rental in a Super Bowl contending season. I would much rather have Dallas Goedert. I would have much rather had Chauncey Gardner-Johnson than the 4th conditional 5th round draft pick they're going to get when they're already collecting a ton of those picks. They already have 20 draft picks combined projected within the next 2 draft classes. And then you also add on this year's class. Like, they have a lot of draft ammunition. When you're contending for a Super Bowl, normally, yes, you try to get out of a player's contract a year early and don't let him walk for nothing the following year. But I'd rather use a rental elite tight end in Dallas Goedert when I'm trying to compete for a championship than not have him on the team. But that's normally not how Howie Roseman works often. Dallas Goedert probably does want a new deal with more guaranteed money after an elite playoff run. If he's not going to play on this deal, if he's not going to play or be happy with even you incentivizing the current contract with more guarantees in 2025 to try to run it back, then I can understand it. But I would try to make something work, and it just sounds like it's not going to happen, and I just don't think this football team is going to be better without Dallas Goedert on this team in 2025. And I'm comfortable paying Dallas Goedert long-term. You guys have heard me say on the show multiple times that although he's 30 years old and gets injured every single year, he is so elite when he is on the field. He is such a clutch player, such a unique tight end that can be a deep threat, that can be a run-after-the-catch nightmare, that's an elite blocker, that I'm willing to sacrifice, I'm willing to deal with the 3 to 5 games he misses every year and his age to have that kind of player on my team. I'm still willing to spend that kind of money on that player. I still think he has a lot of football left in him, but clearly Philadelphia does not feel the same way, and they have a lot of other young players to pay. So I think they're going to go young at tight end. They're going to draft somebody early. I'd say definitely the first 3 rounds, you'll see a tight end taken, maybe with a first or second round selection. You could see it this year to replace Dallas Goedert, but whether I agree with it or not, I think it is going to happen. Unfortunately, but I do think it's going to happen. I can see it. Even though I'm not going to agree with it, I can see the logic, though, like I did with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. It's why, even though I've disagreed with these decisions, I'm not freaking out. Like, as you can tell, like, I disagree with getting rid of Goddard, but it's not going to be something that I'm throwing my hands in the air for, like when Jalen Hurts was drafted in 2020 and you guys heard me screaming bloody murder on this podcast. Like, I do understand it. He is 30. He is always injured. You have 4 legitimate passing targets in this offense already in Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown, Jahan Dotson. I should say just weapons in general. It doesn't have to be passing, but Saquon Barkley. Like, the offense is going to run through those 3 to 4 guys. And like I said, it's a good draft class. If he wants top dollar still at this position, despite his injuries, because of the elite playoff that he had, and has had in the past, I would understand why the Eagles would want to move on. If he wants to reset the market at tight end, I get why they wouldn't be willing to do that. But like Chauncey, I just wonder if there's any sort of middle ground where you can make it work, even if it's not for the long term, which I'd be comfortable with, even if it's just for 2025. I would just love to have Dallas Goedert to run this thing back and try to repeat next season. Because although this offense is going to run through Jalen Hurts, Saquon Barkley, A.J. Brown, and Devontae Smith, you saw how much more dynamic this offense was when Dallas Goedert was out there. Yeah, they were 6-1 without him last year, and they were explosive. But you saw in the playoffs, like when this passing game was inconsistent, Goedert was the most consistent part of that attack. Like, he's a guy that can eat over the middle. He's a deep threat. He's a run after the catch threat. He's an elite blocker. Like, he's a do-it-all weapon at this position. And it just makes your offense even more unstoppable. And I just wish they could try to make it work to keep that kind of player even for one more year. I'd much rather have that than a 4th or 5th round pick. But I know that's not how always the NFL works, and the players have a lot of power, and if he wants a new deal that the Eagles aren't willing to give him, 99% of the time that player does not come back for one more year. But I think the writing's on the wall because they have now signed 2 young tight ends in the last 3 days. They have Grant Calcaterra, so this is already a pretty deep tight end room, and you know they're going to draft somebody early. So I hope it works out, but we've seen the way this works before. We've seen the theme of this offseason is cutting costs. Adam Schefter said the other day, it's going to continue. I think that's going to continue in the form of letting Dallas Goedert go. I think it'll be through a trade. We'll see if they just release him outright. I doubt it. It'll probably be a trade, but I think there's like a 90% chance, and maybe that's extreme, but that's how I'm feeling right now. I think there's like a 90% chance Dallas Goedert is not a midnight green in 2025. Coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, winners and losers for the Eagles through 1 week of free agency. Who benefited from this week and who was effective in a negative way? We'll get into that coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast. This Friday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, which I love to bet on, and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year. FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly, no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. All right, so free agency week 1 is coming to a close. The Eagles, very busy. They've let a lot of guys walk. They have brought in a lot of bargain bin free agents over the last few days. They signed 3 different players today. Avery Williams, a kick slash punt return specialist who's played corner, then switched to running back. He has rushed the passer before. Kind of a do-it-all football player. He'll be a fun watch this summer. They also brought back Patrick Johnson for special teams help and for edge depth. And then they also did bring in a new tight end from the Indianapolis Colts, Kylan Granson, who's 26 and is a lot more proven than a lot of tight ends the Eagles have brought in over the last few years. I think this is more substantial than their past tight end moves like CJ Uzoma or Dan Arnold. Like, yeah, this move is still for a guy that normally gets like 300 receiving yards a year, but he's a younger, better player based on PFF metrics and efficiency grades. I think this move, on top of adding another tight end this week in Harrison Bryant, who's also more of a receiving tight end, and he's big at 6'5", on top of the tight end class, does show that Dallas Goedert is likely gone. So I think that's probably the next big shoe to drop in the offseason, and that could happen, I think, at any time. So who won and who lost this week because of free agency? Players, coaches, the front office, anybody that was affected from the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's get into that now, and I'll start with winners. The biggest winner, I think, of this, I would say the past 2 weeks of free agency, just the first big wave of offseason moves from all 32 teams. If you're a Philadelphia Eagles fan, it's linebacker and running back supporters. Like, if you have for years been screaming from the mountaintops that you want Howie Roseman to finally invest in these positions, well, you won. Because it's crazy that in 2024, Howie Roseman actually prioritized both of these positions. His two biggest moves of the offseason were extending the contracts of Saquon Barkley and Zach Bond, two positions that he never pays. And I think those two are going to be, even when you think about it, those two are going to be even more important in 2025. With more leaders leaving, like Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, Darius Slay, Brandon Graham is going to retire. Milton Williams was a veteran piece. So was Josh Sweat. Suddenly, these guys that weren't in Philadelphia just a calendar year ago are now going to be two of your more vocal, and they already were, but their leadership is going to be even more important in 2025. And then when you look at, on the field, Zach Bond's going to be super important on that second and third level without Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Nakobe Dean's going to be out for a lot of the first half of the season. Darius Slay is gone. Zach Bond is even more important this year than he was last year. And you could say the same about Saquon Barkley and the offense as a whole, and I'll tell you why later on in the show. Maybe Dallas Goedert is out the door, so Saquon's going to have to carry the load even more from an explosive plays perspective. I think if you wanted the Eagles to finally care about these positions, you were definitely a winner this offseason, because this wasn't just a one-year thing, right? And maybe it still is a matter of circumstance. I don't want to say Howie Roseman's philosophy has completely changed, and now he believes in investing in running back all the time, and the same with linebacker. I don't believe so. I think it's a matter of circumstance with just having two stars at these positions that helped you win a championship that you want to keep. But the fact of the matter is, Howie did change. He not only brought these guys in, but when they panned out, he did not let them leave. He paid them, and didn't just pay them, he paid them top dollar. He gave Saquon Barkley more guaranteed money than any running back has ever had in NFL history. He's paying Zach Bond the fourth highest inside linebacker contract in the entire NFL. So if you were somebody that got so annoyed about this year after year after year, you guys were the biggest winners, because the Eagles' biggest moves this offseason were paying a linebacker and a running back. Other winners of the first week of free agency and just the main start of the offseason, year 2 and year 3 prospects that are on this Eagles roster, especially on the defensive side of the football. When you look at, Jalix Hunt, Moro Ijoma, Keely Ringo, Sidney Brown, Will Shipley even, and Jeremiah Trotter Jr., the Eagles let a lot of free agents go because they believe in these young players. They want to give these guys a real chance to meet the potential that the Eagles saw when they invested significant draft resources in these players. They want to give these guys a chance to do what Nolan Smith did last year, and Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, Milton Williams, Jalen Carter. Let these young guys break out like those other young players did. And they brought in some insurance policies, like you look at for Jalix Hunt. They brought in Joshua Uche. For Keely Ringo, they signed Adoree Jackson. They haven't brought in another safety yet for Sidney Brown, but I imagine they will. For Will Shipley, they signed A.J. Dillon. But still, none of these guys should be favored to beat out these young players I'm talking about. The Eagles are hoping these players I'm mentioning are plan A, and all these cheaper free agent signings are supposed to be role players, backups, the plan B or plan C in case these guys don't step up. But the Eagles are clearing the way for all these young players to become legitimate starters this year, or just really good rotational players or backups. Like Jeremiah Trotter Jr., they could have re-signed Oren Burks. He didn't really get paid all that much in Cincinnati. What was it, $5 million total? But while Nakobe Dean's out, they trust Jeremiah Trotter Jr. They could have re-signed Kenneth Gainwell or made a bigger move at running back. But Will Shipley, like they brought in A.J. Dillon, but Will Shipley is definitely going to be the second running back when it comes to snaps and total touches this year behind Saquon Barkley. Adoree Jackson is a guy that has a lot of starts, 82 in fact, under his belt. But they want Keely Ringo to win this job. They have not brought in another defensive tackle since Milton Williams left. And they brought in Joshua Uche, but I don't think Uche is going to compete with Jalix Hunt. I think Uche is definitely either the third or fourth guy in this rotation, and Jalix Hunt is definitely the second, or it's 2A, 2B with like a first or second round pick that they bring in. So year 2 and year 3 prospects for the Eagles, big time winners this week. And then, this one's going to sound a little cocky as an Eagles guy, but the other winners of this week are free agents that signed with Philadelphia. It sounds kind of righteous and, I don't know, cocky, arrogant, but it is true. It sounds uppity as hell, but these guys are lucky they landed in Philadelphia to try to revitalize their careers. Look at last year. Look at Mekhi Becton. Look at Zach Bond. Even Saquon Barkley to a different degree. Isaiah Rodgers coming off a year-long suspension. Becton was seen as a draft bust that was one of the biggest busts in NFL history at this position. Like he was a top 10 pick that the Jets just chewed up and spit out. Zach Bond was a career backup that they brought in potentially just to be that. Saquon Barkley needed a change of scenery. He was a generational running back prospect that was really good in New York, but didn't feel like he met his full potential in New York. And all of those guys bounced back at an elite level in 2025, and they were all key reasons you won a Super Bowl. Of course, not Isaiah Rodgers to the same degree as others, but Rodgers played really well when he came in for Darius Slay, and it helped him get paid and probably earned him a starting job with the Minnesota Vikings this year. So I think these players like Joshua Uche that just fell out of favor in New England and Kansas City these past 2 years. Kenyon Green, a former top 15 pick that Houston was just trying to get rid of. They even took on part of his salary to get rid of him. A.J. Dillon coming off a neck injury where he missed all of last year. This is what those guys are looking to do, is revive their career. Even Adoree Jackson's trying to hang on and still be relevant at the age of 30. Philadelphia has been known to help those kind of players, so I think those guys are winners. Even though they're signing deals that have very little guarantees in them and not a lot of money, Philadelphia can help you get paid in the following season if you sign a one-year deal. All right, some losers before we take a break. I think Bryce Huff. It sounds like they're still shopping Bryce Huff on the open market. According to Jordan Schultz this morning, they are taking calls on Huff. If they do trade him right now, they'd have to eat about $5 million in dead cap. If it's post-June 1st, they free up about $4 million. They brought in Joshua Uche. So I think that tells you, too, they are preparing to have other rotational pass rushing specialists on their roster. They signed Patrick Johnson today, who, even though he left last year for New York, is a player Philadelphia really did like. I think the writing's on the wall that Bryce Huff's probably gone too, along with Dallas Goedert. As I said earlier, Bryce Huff might see this as a win, considering he might not feel like he fits in this defense anymore, especially being a healthy scratch in the Super Bowl. That might be too much to overcome, and he might just want a whole breath of fresh air somewhere else. So maybe he's a winner in this way, but I think it is like a loss if it's the Bryce Huff's rejuvenation bounce back year in Philadelphia stock. That's definitely down after seeing them bring in Uche, Patrick Johnson, hearing that report today from Jordan Schultz that they're taking calls on him. I still believe that he can be a solid third or fourth pass rushing specialist on third downs, but it doesn't look like Philadelphia has that as part of the plan. We'll see, but I think like Dallas Goedert, he'll probably be traded within the next week or two. Another loser, Tyler Steen. Like Tyler Steen he's the girl in this meme. Here, let me show this for our video viewers. Here you go. Like, this is Tyler Steen. For our audio listeners, it's the meme of the guy holding hands with his girlfriend, and he's looking back at the other girl. The guy looking back at the other girl is Jeff Stoutland. He's holding hands with his girlfriend, Tyler Steen, and he's looking back at a former draft bust that has power and that's a run game specialist. Like Tyler Steen, the Eagles like him, but they don't love him. Like this isn't the girlfriend. You know what I mean? This is the friend, that you've been seeing for a long time. Maybe it is the girlfriend, but it's not the wife. Like Tyler Steen just can't get the ring from the Eagles. He can't get that commitment. Can he still beat out Kenyon Green? Can he be a starter this year? Of course he can. Kenyon Green could still be I said the other day he could be the next Mekhi Becton. He could also be the next Chance Warmack, where a former first-round pick that Jeff Stoutland couldn't turn into a really good, his next rejuvenation project. But at the same time, even if Kenyon Green's not that guy and Tyler Steen does end up starting, their eyes are always they're always saying to themselves, can we do better? Can we upgrade? Like, sure, Tyler Steen's fine. Like, we like him. We'll be with him for now, but we're looking for the love of our life. We're looking for our wife. And I feel like unfortunately, I believe in Tyler Steen, but, you look at the Kenyon Green trade, I think the Eagles just continue to be like, can we do better? And so in that way, I think Tyler Steen lost. He can still be a starter this year. I would still say he's the favorite to start, but this is just what the Eagles do. They're always like, can we do better? Is there a draft bust out there that has that power we really like at right guard, that size we really like? And I wouldn't be surprised if Steen yet again is not a starter and is more of a swing, backup in 2025. So I think Tyler Steen's a loser from the first week of free agency as well. And then another loser to wrap things up, the fans. Yes, you just won a Super Bowl. It's hard to complain. But post-Super Bowl off seasons are normally pretty boring for the Eagles, and especially this one. The Eagles have I'm not saying the Eagles are doing the wrong thing with their approach these last 2 weeks, but they let Josh Sweat go, who's a Super Bowl hero. That's been here for 7 years. They let Milton Williams go. They didn't bring back Isaiah Rodgers. Darius Slay is one of the best cornerbacks in franchise history. He leaves for Pittsburgh. They didn't even bring back Oren Burks. It sounds like Mekhi Becton will not be back this year. There's a lot of Super Bowl now legends that are leaving Philadelphia that are fan favorites. And even if you agree with the decisions, it does suck to lose those guys. Like, you form bonds with these players. These guys are part of your life. And when they leave, it sucks. And then when you have nothing else to really get excited about in the form of like other big aggressive moves, like we're used to with Howie Roseman, it can kind of, even though it's the right decision and, blah, 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 this is the way it works after a Super Bowl, it's still, from a fan perspective, it's not fun. Like, this has not been an entertaining week to cover the Eagles. It's the meat and potatoes. It's the stuff you got to get done. It's the paperwork after the fun vacation or before you get the nice car, you got to sign all these papers. Like, I know that's what we're doing right now, but I would say the fans came out as losers this week because it was a lot of losing really popular players and not really bringing in a lot of popular players. So I think the fans came out with a loss this week in free agency as well. Even, again, Eagles fans, you guys are very smart out there, but, this was not fun. And Eagles didn't really bring in anybody that exciting. And, again, I get the logic behind all these free agent signings, but none of them in a vacuum I'm excited about or think they're going to be very good this year. They could be, but, a lot of these guys are coming off career low years. And so that's not overly exciting from an analyst perspective. It's different, but from a fan perspective, it's, nothing to write home about. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, I'm going to tell you why I think the offense might have to carry this Eagles 2025 season, at least for the first half of the year, or at least really early on. I'll tell you why coming up next right here on Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, that's my big thing, entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO gives you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and also start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery and online shopping. Now, I'm budgeting smarter. Still a work in progress, but I'm budgeting smarter and saving more. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use the code LOCKDOWNNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKDOWNNFL for half off your first year. All right, we're wrapping up this Friday edition of Locked On Eagles, wrapping up the first week of NFL free agency. And when you look at what the Eagles did this week, letting a lot of defensive pieces go, Josh Sweat, Milton Williams, Oren Burks, Isaiah Rodgers, Darius Slay, Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. The Eagles have lost 4 starters from their defense, and you could say like 4.5 because Isaiah Rodgers played so much last year. And I'm not saying the defense is going to regress like they did from 2022 to 2023. I don't think that. This will still be, I think, statistically a top 10 defense. Will they be number 1 again? Probably not, but they'll still be top 10. You have still 7 really damn good players, some elite, some very good. There's no guy on defense right now I think you're winning in spite of. You might not be winning because of all these guys, but you're winning with all of them. None of them you're winning in spite of. And so the defense is still going to be good. But I will say, I think you should expect the offense to carry this team early on. I think there will be some growing pains with the defense again, like there was early on last year. I think the offense cannot afford to start inconsistent in 2025 like they did last year. Because when you think about it, they were the youngest defense in football last year. They're going to be not going to be even younger this year because all these guys are a year older, but they're going to be just as young. Like they are kind of getting younger in a lot of positions. Like they're losing Josh Sweat. Who are they replacing him with? A second-year player in Jalix Hunt. They're losing Darius Slay. Who are they replacing him with? A third-year player in Keely Ringo that's younger than Quinyon Mitchell. They're losing Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. Who are they replacing him with? A third-year player in Sidney Brown, or I'd imagine a rookie. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. is going to play a lot of linebacker early on in the season without Nakobe Dean, only a year 2 player. Moro Ijoma is replacing Milton Williams, a 4-year veteran. Ijoma heading into year 3. This defense is going to be young. There's going to be 4 new starters. There will be rookies that are a big part of this rotation. They're going to invest at least 1 significant draft pick in the defensive line, whether it's tackle or edge rusher. It's a really good class. They're going to come away with somebody in the first 2 or 3 rounds. They're probably going to draft a safety at some point early. There's going to be some growing pains on defense again. Not to the same degree as early on last year. They're not going to regress like 2023. But I will say it's fair and it's safe to say that the offense will have to be the better unit early on. I think while the defense gets healthier and kind of gels, there's a lot more movement on defense this year than there will be on offense. The offense is completely locked up. The only difference might be you have Tyler Steen instead of Mekhi Becton, but Steen's been here for years already and has played a lot of football, and you might not have Dallas Goedert. So the offense, you're going to have at least 9 of 11 starters back, and one of the starters that might be the new one has been on this team for years already. So the only real new change on offense might be Dallas Goedert, likely will be Dallas Goedert gone. So this offense is probably going to have to carry them at least early on for a little bit. And that's why I'm saying like they cannot, especially in the passing game, they cannot afford to have the growing pains of last year. Not even growing pains because they're all in their prime now. They're all grown. They're all veterans. They can't be as inconsistent throwing the football as they were last year. They can't be as reliant on the run game. The run game needs to carry them still, but it can't be the lack of balance there was last year. Both the passing game and the running game, they got to be clicking on all cylinders early on. I just think that's probably going to be what we have to deal with early on in the season, and I would just prepare for that. So that's at least where I'm looking at things from an offensive and defensive perspective. The defense is going to have some change again, and I'm not saying that's going to be a common strategy of the Eagles every single year. I don't think it's going to be a continuous strategy to be paying so much on offense and be so young on defense. As both sides age, it'll balance out more. But I do think the way they trust Fangio with a younger defense, they might always be young, pretty young on defense. They'll always probably invest more money on offense than on defense. And so for that, the offense doesn't have any excuse. Like you have all the money, you have all the veterans, all the prime stars. You got to let the defense figure things out and carry them for a little bit. Again, I don't think the defense is going to regress very poorly in 2025, but there's going to be change. There's going to be a lot of change on defense. All right, guys, that's going to do it for today's edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast. Thanks so much for making us your first listen each and every day. We'll see you Monday for another week of shows. Mock Draft Monday returns, a post-free agency mock draft. It's going to look very different as this Eagles roster looks very different. So we'll get into that on Monday. Until then, enjoy your weekend. Thanks for downloading. Thanks for watching and listening. And let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.